Have you ever felt a longing for something you can't quite name? A homesickness for a place you've never been? An ache so deep it weaves itself into your dreams? From the beginning, that ache has lived inside humanity. It is as old as time, older than the mountains, older than the ocean's first tides. Before we dive deeper into this story of hope, make sure to subscribe, like, and share, so you won't miss a single part of this journey that was written with you in mind. It was born in the garden, the moment we turned away from the hand that made us. That longing was never meant to be part of us. It came when separation came, when the whisper of temptation shattered the harmony between creator and creation. But even then, even in the very moment of our greatest loss, a promise was spoken. A vow carved into the fabric of existence itself. Redemption would come. Across every generation, that promise echoed. Through storms and wars, through betrayals and heartbreaks, through the rising and falling of empires, the promise endured. Sometimes it roared like thunder. Sometimes it was only a fragile ember, barely glowing in the ashes. But it was never extinguished. Have you ever wondered if something has been chasing you since before you were born? A love so relentless it would cross any distance, climb any mountain, tear down any wall just to reach you. That is the story you were always meant to hear. The promise came wrapped in words spoken by trembling prophets. It danced on the lips of dreamers and poets who lived and died without seeing it fulfilled. A seed planted in the soil of human history, buried deep, waiting for its appointed time. The ancient scrolls whispered of one who would come, not just to repair what was broken, but to make all things new. A king, yet unlike any king the world had ever seen. A savior, yet bearing none of the weapons of war. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Do you hear the wonder in those words? Not just God above us, not God judging us, God with us, God stepping into the dirt and dust, into the hunger and heartache, into the ordinary grind of our days. Generations waited. Prophets cried out. Songs of hope were sung under foreign skies by captives who wondered if their deliverer would ever come. Families gathered around fires to retell the ancient promises, clinging to them like a lifeline in the dark. And in the silent spaces between the last words of the prophets and the first cries of a newborn child, the world held its breath. The ache grew heavier. The darkness pressed harder. And still, the promise stood. Have you ever waited so long for something that you started to doubt it was real? Have you ever feared that maybe you had misunderstood, that maybe the whispers of hope were only dreams? That was the world into which the promise finally came. But not with armies. Not with banners unfurled across a battlefield. Not with a show of force or power. The promise slipped into the world the way a sunrise slips into the night. Quietly, beautifully, almost imperceptibly at first. A young woman, her hands trembling as she heard an angel speak the impossible. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. A man caught between duty and dreams, choosing to believe that what seemed impossible was real. Choosing trust over fear. A journey to a small town, overlooked and unimpressive. No room, no welcome, no throne prepared. Only a stable, only the pungent smell of hay and animals, only the rough embrace of a manger fashioned for beasts, not kings. And into that forgotten corner of the world, a cry broke through the silence. The promise was born. The one who set galaxies spinning now blinked up at a teenage girl under a canopy of stars he had hung in place. The one who carved out oceans now kicked his tiny feet in the straw. The one whose voice had thundered on Mount Sinai now whimpered, hungry and helpless. Could you have imagined it? Would you have recognized him? Most did not. Bethlehem slept, its people tucked away in their simple homes, unaware that the very heartbeat of the universe had entered their world. Merchants dreamed of profits. Mothers hushed their crying infants. Farmers turned in their weary bodies for another restless night, never suspecting that heaven had touched earth just beyond their doors. Kings plotted within their palaces, their hands clutching jeweled scepters, their minds filled with fear and suspicion. Power, once seen as invincible, trembled beneath the weight of a prophecy too old to ignore. Herod, jittery and cruel, lay awake in his fortress, shadows playing tricks on his mind, whispering of a newborn king who could unseat him. Religious scholars debated ancient texts, scrolls unrolled across dusty tables, fingers tracing the words with trembling reverence. They argued over interpretations, missing the miracle unfolding under their very noses. Minds sharpened by law but dulled by pride could not comprehend a Messiah wrapped in swaddling clothes rather than royal robes. They waited for conquest, for spectacle, for thunder. But love had arrived quietly, and they were too busy dissecting prophecy to recognize its fulfillment. The world turned in its ordinary rhythm, blind to the extraordinary gift cradled in a feeding trough. While heaven rejoiced, earth yawned and carried on, oblivious to the dawn breaking in its midst. But in the hills outside the city, the lowest of the low, shepherds deemed too dirty and unreliable for polite society, heard the first announcement. Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. Good news that shattered centuries of silence. Great joy that rippled across the heavens and stirred the hearts of shepherds on forgotten hillsides. For all people, not just the powerful, not just the pure, not just the chosen few who wore robes and titles, but for the broken, the weary, the overlooked. Even you, whose heart still carries questions you are too afraid to speak aloud. Even me, with all my scars, all my failures, all my secret prayers whispered in the dark. Even the forgotten, whose names are not written in history books, whose lives pass unnoticed by the crowds. Even the forsaken, who have been abandoned by earthly families, dismissed by communities, left out in the cold of indifference. The promise came for them. The promise came for us. The promise did not ask for credentials or perfection. It asked only for hearts willing to receive. Good news. Great joy. For all people, for all time, forever written in the stars and sung by angels into the darkest night. The promise had come not for the worthy, but for the weary. Not for the celebrated, but for the broken. Not for those who thought they had it all figured out, but for those who knew they were lost. The child grew. He grew in the hush of unnoticed places, where dirt paths wound between stone homes and the songs of mothers rose like prayers into the open sky. He grew in the embrace of a carpenter's steady hands and a young mother's whispered lullabies. He learned the taste of bread baked in clay ovens, the roughness of wood beneath small fingertips, the steady rhythm of village life where no one could have guessed divinity lived among them. He grew, laughter mixing with the bleating of goats and the laughter of other children chasing each other through sun-drenched fields. He watched the seasons turn, the grapes ripen, the olive trees twist their roots deeper into the earth. He grew in patience, not the kind born from luxury or endless opportunities, but the patience forged in silent obedience, in the slow, steady rhythm of days where nothing seemed extraordinary. He grew in wisdom, not from libraries or scholars, but from watching the sparrows build their nests, from feeling the pulse of life in every grain of wheat harvested under the blazing sun. He grew in the quiet strength that only blooms in the soil of obscurity, strength that does not demand applause, that does not crumble under neglect, strength that is rooted so deeply it does not need to be seen to be real. He grew as prayers rose from weary hearts around him, prayers for deliverance, for hope, for the promise to finally break through the long silence. He grew carrying the weight of knowing he was the answer to those prayers, yet still choosing to wait until the appointed time. Each unnoticed moment, each small kindness, each unseen act of love and service. They wove together the tapestry of a life perfectly prepared to carry the weight of the world's redemption. And in the unseen fields of Nazareth, where stars shone over simple homes and dusty roads whispered ancient songs, the promise matured, silently, steadily, until the world was finally ready to see the light that had been growing all along. And all the while, the ache of the world throbbed louder. Years passed, years unrecorded by historians, years ignored by the mighty and forgotten by the powerful. Yet these were the years where true miracles quietly rooted themselves deep into the soil of humanity. Years spent in dusty villages and along lonely back roads, where the laughter of children mixed with the cries of those crushed by poverty and injustice. Years spent learning the names of the broken, the ones society refused to name. Years spent memorizing the weary faces of widows and the trembling hands of beggars. Years spent stooping low to hear the unspoken prayers of the desperate. Years spent listening with the ears of eternity, watching with the eyes of compassion, waiting with the heart of a redeemer who knew that salvation would not be rushed. Each sunrise over Nazareth, each meal shared in humble kitchens, each act of unseen kindness added another stitch in the vast tapestry of grace being woven quietly beneath the surface of human history. And still and always, the ache of the world throbbed louder, a drumbeat of yearning that heaven had never stopped hearing, a symphony of longing to which God himself was preparing the final, triumphant answer. Tyrants ruled with iron fists and cold hearts, their names etched into history by the blood of the oppressed. Wars raged across the land like relentless storms, swallowing cities and tearing families apart, leaving only smoke and ruins in their wake. Injustice flourished in gilded halls and dusty streets alike, seeping into every crack of society, turning neighbor against neighbor and drowning hope beneath heavy chains of despair. The people cried out under the unbearable weight of empires and the crushing burden of endless taxes, their prayers rising like smoke into the heavens. pleas for deliverance, for mercy, for a glimpse of the promised light. Every sigh, every tear, every whispered, "How long, O Lord?" wove itself into the great aching symphony of humanity's longing for redemption, for rescue, for a Savior who had not forgotten them. How long, O Lord? Have you ever prayed that prayer? Have you ever felt that maybe heaven was too far, too silent, too slow? But the promise was not late. He was right on time. He always is. And when the moment came, when the water turned to wine and the blind opened their eyes and the lame leapt for joy, the world began to catch its breath. Maybe, just maybe, the promise was not a myth after all. Maybe it had never been a desperate fantasy whispered by the brokenhearted. Maybe it was real, more real than the stones underfoot, more real than the kingdoms that claimed power over men's lives. Maybe it had been breathing just beneath the surface of history, waiting for the perfect moment to break through. Maybe God had not abandoned us. Maybe every silent year, every tear shed under the weight of longing, had been gathered like precious treasure in His hands. Maybe the waiting was not proof of absence, but the slow unfolding of a love too vast to be hurried. Maybe hope was not foolish. Maybe hope was the truest kind of courage, the kind that dares to believe in sunrise while standing in the deepest night. Maybe hope was the secret strength that had kept humanity breathing, yearning, reaching toward a dawn we could not yet see, but somehow knew was coming. Maybe the aching of our hearts was not a curse, but a compass, pointing us home. A sacred hunger placed within us to draw us back to the one who had never stopped loving us. A homing signal in our souls, reminding us that we were made for more, for redemption, for restoration, for relationship. Maybe, just maybe, the promise was never far. It had been written into the very fabric of our being, stitched into our DNA, whispered into every heartbeat, echoing in every tear, every song, every whispered prayer. Maybe, and this changes everything, the promise was always meant to be fulfilled in us, and through us, and for us. Maybe it still is. The story was only beginning. The road ahead would wind through miracles and misunderstandings, through celebrations and betrayals, through nights so dark they would make the stars themselves seem cruel. But always, always, the promise would hold. Always the hand that shaped the stars would be reaching for you. Always the voice that spoke light into darkness would be calling your name. Because the promise was not just for ancient Israel. The promise was for every broken heart, every shattered dream, every lonely soul who ever dared to wonder if there was more. The promise was and is for you. And it has only just begun. Can you hear it? The song of redemption still echoes across the ages, inviting you home. Will you listen? Will you dare to believe that the promise, ancient, eternal, and unstoppable, was always meant to find you? The journey is calling, and it begins now. If you don't want to miss the next chapter of this journey into hope, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. Your heart was made for this story, and the next part is just around the corner.